What's going on, guys? Welcome back to #AskGSM episode 368 here today for Wednesday, December 16th, 2020. I am Graham GSM Matthews. Hope you guys are doing well. If you want to send in a question to the show, you could do so by tweeting me on the Twitter machine at WrestleRant with the #AskGSM. Find me on Facebook as well at facebook.com/Graham.GSM.Matthews and drop a comment on the post that I usually put up on Tuesdays. I finally remembered this week. So the post went up on Tuesday. I got no Facebook questions, but it's there regardless in case you want to send it in through Facebook. But you can also drop a question down below in this very video and include your question, and I'll include your question in next week's edition. And another final reminder for the 2020, not a final reminder, but another reminder rather for the 2020 WWE/NXT/AEW Year in Review Awards. The polls are going to close not next week, but when it goes from the 29th to the 30th. I feel weird saying at midnight on December 30th because it sounds like, oh, on New Year's Eve, that's when it's going to end, which is not the case because we're going to do the results and review the results on the December 31st episode of WrestleRant Radio. So that being said, it's going to be a little while for us to go through the review or go through the results and share them on the show. We got to record the show. So that's why I'm closing the polls on, I guess, midnight on the 29th. So as soon as the clock strikes on Eastern time, at Eastern time anyway, the 30th, December 30th, which I believe is on a Wednesday, Thursday? I don't know. I'm not sure. I think the last day to vote is, off the top of my head, I'm pretty sure it's definitely the 30th, but I'm not sure what day of the week that is. It's going to be, so the 30th. So not next Tuesday, but the Tuesday after that is the final day to vote in the 2020 WWE/NXT/AEW Year in Review Awards. But why wait? Why not just do it right now? Vote for the Wrestler of the Year, male and female, for WWE, AEW, NXT. You can vote for the Feud of the Year, Shocking Moment of the Year, Most Disappointing Wrestler of the Year, Most Likely to Break Out in 2021 Wrestler. You can vote for Tag Team of the Year for both WWE and AEW. There's a lot of categories, probably more categories this year than ever before, which is why you should vote, cast your vote right now in the Year in Review Awards. It's the 8th annual. It's been a lot of fun doing it the last couple of years. And be sure to listen to the results show for the final episode of the year for WrestleRant Radio in 2020 on December 31st itself. Also, like I said last week, be sure to check out my exclusive interview with Goldberg that went live last Friday here on the channel, as well as on Bleacher Report, talking his latest WWE Untold documentary, coming to WWE, potential opponents he would like to face at some point. I saw a lot of wrestling news websites run with that last week, which was super cool. So, again, check out my exclusive interview with Bill Goldberg right now, both here on the YouTube channel in audio form and in article form over on Bleacher Report from last Friday. So that's about it, guys. Let's get going right into the questions now. Next week is the December 23rd episode of the show. Last year, it just so happened to fall on Christmas. This year, obviously, it's 2 days before due to the leap year. But yeah, so be sure to check out that episode next week. I'm going to try to hope to make it holiday-themed. If you would like to send in Christmas questions like last year, that would be amazing. If not, that's fine, too. I just don't imagine how much in wrestling is going to be going on at that point. So if you want to send in, I was going to say year-end questions, but it's not going to be the final episode of the year like last year. The final episode of this show is actually going to be on the 30th, Wednesday, December 30th. So I would save those questions like, oh, best this, best that, blah, blah, blah. I mean, some of you guys already sent that stuff in, but I would love to keep a Christmas theme for next week. I know that's not entirely practical, but, that just... That would be pretty cool. But nonetheless, let's get right into the questions, starting with the YouTube stuff for this week, starting with No Laura from YouTube. Their first question was, do you think Kenny Omega will challenge all the world champions of every wrestling promotion for their title? I don't know about every wrestling promotion, but I think it would be a cool gimmick to see him as the traveling champion. He's already the AAA Mega Champion. I'm not sure if that's their top title over in AAA. I don't think so. But he is a top champion over in AAA right now. He's held that championship for well over a year at this point. Obviously, the current AEW World Champion. It was confirmed last night. You sent that question in a week ago, but it was confirmed last night that he's not going for the Impact World Championship, at least not yet, but it's going to be Rich Swann and the Motor City Machine Guns versus Kenny Omega and the Good Brothers, the old Bullet Club, running at it again. So I'm really looking forward to that. That's coming up at the Hard to Kill Impact pay-per-view in early January. I think January 16th, if I'm not mistaken. It's the second or third Saturday of the year. So that should be a lot of fun. And maybe at the subsequent pay-per-view or on an episode of Impact soon after, we can get Omega and Swan. Maybe not title for title, maybe just a regular champion versus champion match. But hey, if I'm Impact, I like Rich Swann, but I think Omega as the world champion makes a whole lot of sense. and it's going to bring a lot of new eyes, I think, to Impact for more than just 1 week. Because I didn't see a lot of people talking about Impact last night the same way they were about a week ago when he first showed up on the show. So that's obviously a possibility. Him going to Ring of Honor to take their championship or challenge for their title, I think would be really cool. There's been no semblance of a working relationship quite yet between the two promotions. Ring of Honor has kind of been all on its own. And they've been doing shows recently, but they were working with the NWA before the whole pandemic happened earlier this year. So if AEW is working with NWA, why not Ring of Honor as well? Why not they work? Why don't they work with AEW? You know what I mean? So him and Nick Aldis would be a lot of fun. I know it's two heels, but Nick Aldis can be a strong babyface as well. So Aldis and Omega for the NWA World title would be fucking cool. The current Ring of Honor World Champion is Roosh, but they could always put the belt on Brody King this Friday at Final Battle. And they do have a pay-per-view this Friday. It's supposed to be their biggest pay-per-view of the year. It's their first pay-per-view back since Final Battle a year ago. So I'm looking forward to that on Friday, and be sure to check it out. It should be a good show. But yeah, I could see that. The Ring of Honor one and the NWA ones are iffy, but Impact seems almost inevitable. Him going to New Japan, as many people have pointed out, and challenging Kota Ibushi, who I know is not the current champion. It is Naito, I believe, still. But Ibushi, I think, is going for the gold at the Wrestle Kingdom show in early January. So Ibushi wins the title. Omega walks out and challenges his old friend for his championship. That would be fucking amazing. Like that, I might have to watch the show live just to see if that's going to happen or not. Probably not, but it would be pretty cool. So nonetheless, I think that'd be a cool gimmick. We'll see how far they go with it. But as far as the Impact AEW working relationship is concerned, I think that's pretty fucking cool. Let's see here. Call Me PSN from YouTube. Their question was, thoughts on Jim Ross's criticism about AEW wrestlers doing dive spots in multiple people and causing issues with the locker room? Did you hear about the anonymous wrestler's message, or Brandon Cutler's tweet regarding JR's comments? So yeah, this was just one giant mess in the last couple days. I think it started on Saturday or Sunday. I don't remember exactly which. I know I saw Brandon Cutler's tweet on Sunday, and it was fucking embarrassing. Listen, as far as Jim Ross's comments are concerned, I can see both sides of this thing. Should he be criticizing the product the way that he is? Probably not. Now he should be able to express his opinion. But you don't see, and I know they're not as big wrestling fans, obviously, but you don't see any of the commentators for WWE going on Twitter. I mean, maybe they should. Sometimes Charlie Caruso and people like that will throw a subtle dig at why this storyline stopped out of nowhere. But Jim Ross is offering a legitimate criticism of something that has been a problem within wrestling now, within the industry for a very long time, for at least 10 years or so. More so in the last couple of years than ever before, but definitely in the last decade, I would say, as far as that goes back. So he was pretty aggressive with his comments. And listen, I completely agree with what he had to say. What he had to say was spot fucking on. The issue is that he's not burying the talent. I just think maybe he should have gone about it more of a cordial way. Now, he did say that he said it to a talent there. He did it. As far as we know, he's been saying this stuff to the talent for months. They won't listen to him, so he has to take to a bigger platform to make sure they kind of, double down on it type of thing. I think he should be he should be saying this shit to Tony Khan. Telling Tony Khan, listen, I don't think these guys should be doing all these spots. And maybe he did. Maybe we come to find out that he did. Tony Khan didn't listen. I don't know. It's not to the point where AEW is unwatchable. I don't know if it's a minor criticism, but it is something that annoys a lot of people with the constant kickouts and the super kicks and the Canadian destroyers and shit like that, He was talking specifically about DDTs and super kicks. I think those moves are so far gone, it doesn't even matter. Making those moves finishers at this point is not going to happen. DDT is as common as a wrist lock. That's never going to happen. But I would say preserve the Canadian destroyer, stuff like that. I get the basis of his argument. And again, I completely agree. Playing devil's advocate, should he have gone on a popular podcast platform and expressed his aggressive opinion that way? Probably not, because it doesn't make the wrestlers look very good. And he is kind of critical of some of, if not a lot of these people while on commentary. He probably shouldn't do that. But again, a lot of what he says has merit, and he knows what he's talking about. And the anonymous message, shut the fuck up. Just say it. If Jim Ross can come out and say it, he's not saying it to a message board. He's not saying it to Dave Meltzer. He went on his podcast. He says it on the show every single week, and he said he talked to the talent about it too, and they just didn't listen. But then his podcast was his last resort. And then that's how it kind of got out there. And he's been saying this stuff for a long time, though. This really isn't anything new. The talent. So Cutler is one thing. I guess to a certain degree, I respect him for actually putting his name on the complaint as opposed to someone anonymously talking about it to a fucking message board. Who gives a fuck? If you're not man enough to just... listen, if Jim Ross can do it, then why not the talent? The talent, why not just stand up to you? Not want Jim Ross to not like you? Just tweet about it. Or talk to JR about it. Going to a message board anonymously to me. For something like this, I think is incredibly dumb. It's not like you're speaking out against the company. Like a lot of the WWE people do that. They'll talk to Fightful and stuff like that. That I kind of understand because you're in fear of losing your job. You're not going to lose your job if you speak out against Jim fucking Ross. Like, I love JR, but him having a different opinion from someone is not going to get that other someone fired, especially in AEW. They're not going to do that petty bullshit. So, I thought that was annoying. The Brandon Cutler thing, again, he actually had enough balls to put his name on that tweet, but the tweet was so embarrassing that I couldn't help but laugh at it. We're talking about Brandon fucking Cutler here, a guy who has just recently started winning matches. I know that's all kayfabe, but listen... The fact of the matter is that this guy wouldn't even have a job anywhere in wrestling. At least anywhere major, if he wasn't friends with the Young Bucks. The guy is so generic, it's not even funny. He's not terrible by any means, but I don't get the Cutler appeal. I'm not even sure if there really is an appeal. It's not like he has this giant fan base, but the whole Dungeons and Dragons shit, the whole elaborate entrance makes up for the fact that he is so bland in the ring and on the mic. The guy works the fucking camera for being the Elite. Honestly, I know he's not being pushed at an aggressive level, like, he's not being overpushed. He's exactly where he should be. But for someone like that to speak out, as opposed to, the Young Bucks, who were definitely guilty of that shit as well, but at least they're bigger names, they're EVPs in the company, that's a little bit different. For Brandon Cutler, of all people, I know the guy probably realizes he has nothing to lose, but, to put out what he did, I'm not going to read the tweet verbatim here. It's nothing, terrible or offensive. I just don't have it in front of me. And I don't really want to go out of my way to look at it. Yeah, I'm sure if it's probably still up. I'm sure he hasn't taken it down. But just the way he worded it, he was like, oh, watch me on Dynamite, cuss her up like a coil, and watch me fall like an idiot and catch all these other people. Listen, I know kayfabe is dead, but to just go out there on the show and be like, hey, listen, this is all fake, is incredibly dumb. It's really, really stupid. And especially for someone of his caliber, I thought that was really dumb. So, I got to take Jim Ross's side on this. There are some criticisms against JR as well as far as how he kind of, shares his opinion on certain things. Not that he shouldn't have an opinion on, but just the way that he shares them and the fact that he's sharing them at all. But I think largely this is the fault of the performers of the company, specifically people like Cutler, whoever shared the message anonymously, and whoever is guilty of that shit. You don't have to use the super kick as a finisher. But you don't also have to do it a million times a match. And it's not just an AEW thing. It's a WWE thing. It's a Ring of Honor thing. It's an every company thing. Every company is guilty of it. More so AEW, I think, than any other promotion. But definitely every company. And Jim Ross doesn't work in those other places. He works here. He works in AEW. He can talk to these talent. So I completely understand where he's coming from. Let's get to Brandon A. here. His lengthy question here from YouTube. He says... what's up, GSM? Merry Christmas and hope you are doing well and staying safe. I just want to point out really quick that when you were talking about your favorite Christmas movies a few weeks ago, there was no mention of Die Hard when you answered the question about best Christmas movies a couple of weeks ago. Is that because you know in your heart of hearts that Die Hard is not a Christmas movie? Just something to think about, Brandon said. And that's not his question. He went on to say something else, but... I don't know how I even said at the time, there's probably more movies I'm not thinking of. But yes, Die Hard is a Christmas movie. We're not going down this road again, but it's definitely a Christmas movie. I can't say it's among my favorites just because I only saw it for the first time a couple of years ago. I do like it a lot, but if I'm putting together my top 5 favorite Christmas movies, I don't think it would be in there. So, it is a Christmas movie, though. End of discussion. He goes on to say... you also mentioned not liking A Christmas Story, as you have in the past. I understand that, even though it is my favorite. I believe you were correct when you thought it was a popular opinion, that the movie isn't good because I know a lot of people who don't care for it. It's definitely polarizing, as many love it as well. I believe there are 3 reasons it resonates with me so well. 1, it was filmed in my hometown of Cleveland, Ohio, and continues to be the pride and joy of our city during Christmas time. That makes sense. 2, I was a huge daydreamer the way that Ralphie was during the movie. And 3, this is probably the weirdest to say, but growing up I was obsessed with legs, and so I would have reacted the same way as Ralphie and his father when they received the leg lamp. I have mellowed out a lot since then, albeit I am still a fan, just not obsessed like I was when I was a kid. Anyway, that brings me to my only question. Are there any movie characters or wrestlers that you are a fan of because they reflect something about you specifically and personally, as opposed to just liking them because they are interesting characters regardless? That's a good question. And I can see what you're saying about the whole Christmas Story thing. I'm not saying it's a terrible movie. I might have said that originally. It's not terrible. It's just not among my favorites. And I just can't say I care, personally about the movie. I've seen it a bunch of times. I don't know if I've ever seen it in full, but I've seen enough of it just to not give a shit about A Christmas Story. I really don't. That being said, though, that is a good question. There aren't a lot of people that come to mind or characters that come to mind that I like just because they like a certain thing as opposed to caring about them for a specific reason, like for their character motivations or their character development, whatever. For characters in movies, I really don't know. I mean, the only thing that would really make me care about a character in a movie, if I didn't care about them specifically, but I cared about what they're interested in, that I liked them for what they were interested in, probably if it was something wrestling related. I'm not really sure what that would be. But like if there was ever a movie character that was a wrestling fan, I didn't care about the character themselves, but I cared about them because they liked wrestling, then maybe. I can't really think of any. You mentioned wrestlers, though. Not that this is really the case anymore, because he's come to NXT and I have become a full-on fan of him. I just didn't really know. I knew nothing about him before. I just knew the fact that he was a Back to the Future fan, obviously being Kushida. So Kushida, I found out years ago, had a Back to the Future-inspired gimmick. I had barely seen any of this guy's work. I know he was good. I had seen him at a Ring of Honor show live, I think All-Star Extravaganza, 4 years ago in 2016. And I'm like, oh, this guy's cool, blah, blah, blah. And I had seen him a bunch in Ring of Honor in 2017, but I just didn't care about Kushida. I really didn't. But I did like him for the fact that his whole gimmick was back to the... It might have been you, Brandon, or someone else, I don't remember, but someone pointed out to me years ago, like, oh, why don't you like Kushida? Because he's a Back to the Future guy. Like, I figured you would be a fan of his because of that. And I liked him for the Back to the Future stuff. I knew nothing about him, didn't care about his in-ring work. I mean, I thought he was good. I just didn't give a fuck about him. But obviously, I've become a bigger fan of him now that I see him more regularly in NXT. So he would probably be the biggest example of that. I wasn't really sure what to say when I first saw your question in regards to who I would say for that, but that name just came to mind. It would definitely be Kushida. Just because, I mean, not now, but originally, I knew nothing about the guy aside from the fact that he wrestled in Japan and that he had a Back to the Future gimmick. Back to the Future is my favorite movie of all time, so therefore I was a fan, even though I never saw like more than 5 of his matches, He also said, also next week, looking forward to a Christmas card, and no, I'm not actually mailing anything, he said. Take care. Like I said, I would love a Christmas card, not a literal Christmas card, but a Christmas card of questions for next week. Again, how practical that is, I don't know. You guys are the ones sending in the questions, so if you can send in Christmas questions, I would love it. But then again, we did all the Christmas questions last year, like favorite Christmas movies, traditions, blah, blah, blah. I've probably said all that before, so it's probably nothing new. So again, if you don't want to send in a Christmas question, that's totally fine. But it would be fitting, given that Christmas this year is 2 days after the episode airs. So let's get to the Twitter questions now. Did I say Twitter questions? Twitter questions. At Mr. Marceau's question was, since AEW's inception, who was someone that you look forward to and has failed to impress, and someone who you did not know and are now impressed with? I think I may have answered this question before. A lot of people, actually. And I know RJ already know. The funny thing with RJ with these questions is that some of the questions that he asks, he already knows the answer to. But MJF is one of them. I knew nothing about the kid. I mean, I think I heard him on a Stone Cold podcast before he went to AEW, but other than that, I knew nothing about the guy. Obviously, he's really impressed me. I think he's a star. Sammy Guevara. I mean, it's really more so the latter than the former. There's a lot of people I didn't know previously that I'm now a big fan of, that I had no idea who they were previously. People that fall in that category include MJF, Sammy Guevara. I really like Orange Cassidy. I'm not, in love with the character. I wasn't really sure what to think when I first saw him. I became a fan. And now, with the way that he's been booked, beating Jericho twice, I thought was incredibly dumb. But I'm still an Orange Cassidy fan. Had no idea who he was pre-AEW, and now I'm a fan of his. He would fall in that category. Wardlow, I mean, he's relatively new anyway. Hikaru Shida, Chris Statlander, I kind of got to know a little bit before she went to AEW, but not a lot, and I'm a fan of hers as well. Man, there's a bunch. Darby Allin also falls in that category, so those are just a few. Luchasaurus, I kind of already knew. Jungle Boy, I didn't know, so I'm a fan of his now. For people that I looked forward to seeing that I didn't know a lot about, that have failed to impress, that's a good question. Obviously, again, RJ already knows the answer to this, but the first name that comes to mind, I'm kind of contemplating other answers, but one name that comes to mind is Joey Janela. I heard a lot about Joey Janela, obviously one of the kings of the indies for a long time. He's signed to the AEW right from the get-go. He has definitely failed to impress me. I just don't give a flying fuck about Joey Janela. I really don't. I really, really don't. So he would definitely fall in that category. I'm trying to think. I mean, I already knew who Allie was. Like, I looked forward to seeing Allie in AEW. She is definitely disappointed. I feel like she's regressed in the time that she's been in AEW. I never really looked forward to seeing the Butcher and the Blade. I like Braxton Sutter. Wasn't that his name in Impact? Allie's husband. He's the Blade of the Butcher and the Blade. I liked him in Impact, but the Butcher and the Blade tag team does nothing for me, personally. The Acclaimed I knew nothing about. They recently debuted. I've already been impressed with them. Top Flight's a good tag team. I'm trying to think. There's a lot of people under contract there. Lance Archer, I didn't know a ton about. He's already impressed me in the year that he's had in AEW in the last 9 months or so. Brody Lee, obviously, we already knew everything that Brody Lee was capable of. He just hasn't had a great run there. I know he's been the leader of the Dark Order. He was TNT champion for a little bit. I just feel like he hasn't really blown me away the way that I was hoping for. Like, when we heard that Luke Harper was a free agent, we're like, oh man, he's got to go to AEW. We could blow the roof off the place. And I guess he would have had he debuted, and maybe it would be different if there were fans there, but I feel like he's just another guy on the roster. And I just don't really give a fuck about him. Brody Lee, and I guess Joey Janela. Joey Janela, I didn't really know a lot about. I heard the name a lot. Didn't see a lot of his work. I was looking forward to seeing what he would bring to the table in AEW, and he's done absolutely nothing. Now, I say that on a day where he's going to be facing Kenny Omega later, and I think the main event of Dynamite. I'm not sure if it's the main event or not, but it's like a no disqualification match. It's the rematch from the AEW World Title Eliminator, which I'm glad they're going back to because, Joey Janela couldn't compete in the tournament. Never acknowledged it again. That was 2 months ago, but whatever. So yeah, he would probably be number one. Brody Lee, we already knew what he was capable of. I just don't think he's really risen up to the level that I thought he would be at in AEW. I don't know if that's a booking thing or if that's one of those things where he's just not as good as we thought he was. I don't know. Miro's another one. Miro, I know, is great. We've seen that in we saw that in WWE. But the way that he's been booked in AEW doesn't give me a lot of confidence for the future of his character. He's been a little better recently and coming across more aggressive and whatever and more unhinged. But the way that he's been booked as this comedy character and the whole video game shit, maybe that is who he is in real life, honestly. The whole video game stuff, that's cool. He has his own Twitch channel. As a wrestling character, it's not fucking compelling. It might work for Kip Sabian and people like that. For Miro, it's just a complete miscast. It doesn't work at all. It's not interesting. He has definitely disappointed for me in AEW so far. He's probably going to rebound, but so far he's been a definite disappointment. At Reborn Again, John Ritland from the Twitter and YouTube machines. Check out his YouTube show, Real Honesty with John Ritland. His first question was, as the year draws to a close, what's one bad thing in both WWE and AEW that you hope they would address but have failed to do so? That's a good question. WWE, it's so commonplace to get your hopes up for something or, for them to not explain stuff where I really can't think of a lot. Like, stuff happens all the time that either has no follow-up or they just don't do it properly or they never explain a certain thing. I can't think of many examples, even though there are a lot of examples, just because it happens so often. In AEW, I feel like that doesn't happen a lot. So with AEW, the one thing that comes to mind, and I don't know if this applies to your question or not, it's the win-loss record shit. They don't explain it a lot of the time. They don't bring it up a lot. I know you see the little numbers when they come out for their entrance. But why are certain people getting title shots when they aren't even in the top 5? This has been a problem all year. I hate the win-loss records. It's a good idea in theory. But like, for example, Nyla Rose was number 1 in the women's title rankings for fucking 5 months? And people were getting title shots before. Thunder Rosa, who had never been in the company before, and I love Thunder Rosa, she got a title shot like one of her first matches in AEW. And she wasn't even in the top 5. Again, I think they should be doing Thunder Rosa and Hikaru Shida at a pay-per-view like All Out. But if you're going to be building up these, power rankings, they should probably mean something. I think the power rankings are completely pointless. Completely pointless. And they're going to get started all over again at the beginning of 2021. I don't know. I just think it's a complete fucking waste. I would do it from Double or Nothing to Double or Nothing from year to year as opposed to an entire calendar year. Because everything builds to Double or Nothing. But whatever. It's weird. I just think I think the win-loss records in AEW are so flawed, it's not even worth it. They just don't make a lot of things make sense as far as that stuff is concerned. Again, I think it's a great idea, but they haven't really handled it with care the way that I figured they would, or hope to anyway. So I would just abolish that at some point. With WWE, one storyline that comes to mind, again, there's been a lot of examples, I just can't really think of many at the moment. But one of them that comes to mind is the Adam Pearce thing. Now, it's not a major storyline, but he's been a WWE official, as they call him, on WWE TV all year long. All year he's been on the show as an official. What the fuck is his title? Is he a GM? Is he a commissioner? He's making matches left and right. They have yet to explain what Adam Pearce's role is on the show, and it's so annoying because he's always on the show, and I like Adam Pearce. But if he's going to be on the show, the least you could do, it wouldn't kill you to have Vince there, or even Stephanie, Shane, or Triple H, or somebody to come out for a 10-second backstage segment to say to Adam Pearce, you're the new commissioner of Monday Night Raw and SmackDown. You're the new GM of Raw and SmackDown. You have the ability to make matches. What happened to us being in charge? That whole promo from, 2 years ago? From Tomorrow, I think it was. 2 years ago from Tomorrow. That we're the authority. What the fuck happened to that shit? You know what I mean? We were told that we were the authority, then nothing ever came of that. Apparently we're not, because Adam Pearce is making the matches, so... Yeah, they got to explain that. And they definitely won't at this point. It's been going on so long, they won't even bother to explain it. But it would be nice if they, if they bother to explain it at some point in the next couple of weeks. I would say the whole hacker thing from SmackDown, but they did eventually get around to explaining that. I mean, it probably wasn't the original plan, but Ali was probably going to be behind it before they pulled the plug on it. But I'm glad they finally tied up that loose end, even though it has to do with Retribution, and I just don't give a fuck about Retribution. John's second question... non-wrestling related, but what's one movie released this year that you thought would be good, but ended up being extremely disappointing? It's a good question. Obviously, I didn't see a lot of movies this year, just because the movie theaters closed in March. The last movie I saw in theaters was Invisible Man. I liked Invisible Man. I'm trying to think of what movies I saw this year. I know before the pandemic happened, I saw Invisible Man, I saw Sonic, which I wasn't overly anticipating, but that was actually mildly better than I thought it would be. I thought that was decent. And I saw, even though it came out last year, I saw Jumanji 2. And I enjoyed that. I thought it was good. Not as good as the original, but it was good. So I haven't seen a lot of, I know you, John, watch a lot of this stuff on Netflix and, the horror, Shudder, I think is what it's called, the horror movie streaming service. I don't watch a lot of that stuff, new movies that come out on those type of platforms. I saw what was it? Tiger King. That wasn't a movie. That was a documentary. I like that. As far as movies are concerned, I did go to see Tenet. So I would probably say that just because Tenet had all this hype and it's a Christopher Nolan movie. And I'm not the biggest fan of Christopher Nolan. I like the Dark Knight movies. I haven't seen... I actually recently saw Interstellar and I thought it was good. A little confusing, but I thought it was good. I haven't seen... what was the other one? Inception, isn't that a Christopher Nolan movie? Haven't seen. I know that's a very popular movie. Haven't seen it. So I finally saw Tenet a month after it came out. And this was when theaters reopened safely over here, and I think they're still open. I don't know. And I think Tenet is no longer playing. It had been playing for fucking months. They had it in there for months because nothing else was coming out. I saw it. It was just too confusing. I mean, you have to watch it a second time to really get it. I don't want to go watch it a second time. It was way too long, too confusing. And it wasn't oh man, such a satisfying conclusion. It really wasn't. It was we're too meta. I don't know. I didn't love it. I thought it was decent. It wasn't one of the worst movies I've ever seen, but it wasn't worth the time that I spent to go see it. Let's put it that way. I'm glad I saw it just to see what all the hype was about going into it. But after seeing it, I really don't give a fuck. I really don't. So, I would probably say Tenet for that. Because even other than that, I haven't really seen a lot of movies. that have come out this year. Because, again, no movies have come out in theaters. And as far as the streaming services go, what movies have come out on the streaming services? I know you didn't like Scoob. I haven't seen Scoob. I wanted to watch it. I probably still will. I wanted to watch Batista's movie, My Spy. I know that it's a kid's movie, but I still wanted to see it. I heard it was good. That's on Amazon Prime, I think. Probably watch that one of these days. But yeah, I think those are all the movies I've seen in 2021, which is wild because usually I would go to the movies like twice a month, but not this year, not in 2020. So yeah, speaking of 2020, his next question was, as bad as 2020 has been, due to the pandemic mostly, has wrestling this year been as bad as some fans think? Sure, some weekly shows, gimmicks, storylines haven't been great, but there's been quite a bit of good also, right? I agree. I don't think 2020 has been the worst year for wrestling. Obviously, considering the circumstances with no fans, that really sucks. But as far as the weekly products go, listen, Raw is abysmal right now. It wasn't terrible all year round. I thought Raw was actually a pretty good show coming into 2020. Largely due to the Paul Heyman reign, and no, Paul Heyman didn't save Raw like a lot of people thought he would, myself probably included. But he did do some good stuff. I thought he was responsible for some pretty cool storylines and characters getting on the show. I would say Raw really took a turn for the worse. I mean, even honestly, during the first pandemic months, when it was all like promo-based, it was still a pretty good show, was Raw. They aired a lot of replays and a lot of like old matches and shit, which wasn't, ideal. But, it was still a pretty good show. I would say it took a turn for the worse maybe in the summer, June, July, August, I would say. I'm not sure. Definitely in the fall. Definitely since right after SummerSlam. SummerSlam, the post-SummerSlam show was one of the worst Raws I've ever seen. It was fucking terrible. So I know that was really a turning point for the show. Prior to that point, I don't remember it being that bad. I would really have to go back and look at the results and what was on the shows at that point. But SmackDown's improved this year. It was a pretty bad show at the beginning of the year, but that and Raw have kind of like switched, where SmackDown's now a better show. Not must-see by any means, but a much better show than it has been in a while. Impact has been putting out some quality content. AEW has made the most of the environment and really put out some great shows in 2020. NWA hasn't run a lot of stuff. They did the Shockwave show. I've been keeping up with that. That's been a good show. Ring of Honor's come back better than it was before. Ring of Honor is better now with no fans and the way they're currently presenting the product than it was pre-pandemic. And I think NXT UK is the same thing. NXT UK isn't an amazing show by any means, but they put out some pretty banger matches in the last couple of months. NXT UK has been good. NXT has kind of taken a dip without fans. That's definitely that's definitely been a weaker product in 2020 due to no fans. But it's still a pretty good show. So I wouldn't say, oh man, 2020, the worst year in wrestling. I mean, it's the worst year for a lot of things due to the current circumstances. It's the worst year for music and for movies. For wrestling, we're still getting wrestling. Like with the movies, we're not getting the movies, but with wrestling, we're not, we're not getting it. It's still airing every week. A lot of the promotions are still up and running. No indie shows, and that sucks. But as far as the major companies go, there's been a lot of great matches and a lot of good storylines and stuff like that between all the companies. I don't really keep up with New Japan. New Japan came back earlier on in the year because they were, safer with COVID than the fucking US is. What a surprise that we're behind on the 8 ball there. But anyway, I really don't think 2020 has been as bad as some fans think. Exactly as you said, John. Not the best year by any means. Far from my favorite year in wrestling as a fan, but it's had a lot of good as well. A lot more good than I think a lot of people think, just due to the current circumstances with the pandemic and whatever. At Stephen A. 1181, how dead should Retribution be? That's a good question. It's a good question because it's true. It should have been dead from the get-go. Retribution's a dumb gimmick. It sucks. What I see from them every week does not compel me at all. Mace beating Ricochet, Slapjack beating Ricochet, it is doing more to hurt people than it is building them up. Mace and Slapjack are not stars just because they beat Ricochet, who doesn't have any credibility anyway. Just because they beat Team Raw doesn't make me care about them. You know what I mean? I feel like it's a lose-lose, because if you beat Retribution, it's a waste of a win, because they're a gimmick that means nothing anyway. And if Retribution beats you, then it makes everyone else involved look worse. So it's just a complete waste. That's been one of the worst parts of 2020, if not the worst part about 2020 in wrestling, has been fucking Retribution. What a waste. At noob_n_code 1991, do you think Kieran Q is a mysterious leader of Xia Li and Boa? Oh, definitely. Not even a question. Definitely Xia Li is behind it. You can kind of tell from what we've seen so far, it does look like a female under the mask. I think they've actually established that with like the painted nails and stuff. Not that it can't be a guy, but they actually recently trademarked the name, what was it, Karen Kwan or something like that? They trademarked some name that was Karen something. It's obviously Karen Q. She's been gone for a while. She broke her leg, I think, like a year ago or something. She's been out for a long time. I remember her from Ring of Honor, and she was decent. She had potential, so. And I believe this is like a giant, like, Chinese storyline. Xia Li is Chinese. Boa is Chinese. I believe Karen Q is Chinese as well. I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure she is. So it would make sense to involve her in the angle. I don't want to see just one giant Chinese stable. Like, oh, let's throw all the Chinese people in one group. Like, not necessarily for that reason, but if the storyline is compelling, then I'm willing to give it a chance. What I've seen from this in the last month, I don't know what to fucking think about this shit. The whole, like, oh, she's coming, the Boa thing, and just, I don't know. It's almost comical. It's different, but I don't have faith that I know NXT usually, I have faith they're going to do right by it. This, I don't really have a lot of faith in. I don't know where it's going. It's not like Xia Li and Boa are these great wrestlers that are going to make this thing work. Xia Li has improved. Boa, we have barely seen this guy on the show. It's not like they're these amazing wrestlers that are going to make this gimmick work. Like, for example, Brody Lee or someone like that, being in the Dark Order. I have faith they might be able to make it work because he's really, really good. Xia Li and Boa, not that they're bad, we just don't know a lot about them. So we'll see where this thing is going. I don't have a lot of faith at this point after what I've seen in the last month. But Karen Q, hey, it gets her back on the show. Even if the gimmick sucks like Retribution, I don't think it's going to be as bad as Retribution, but it gets her on the show. So I appreciate that. Let's see. Their next question, non-wrestling related question, but what are your thoughts on some of the announcements that Disney made last week? I thought the whole panel was cool. They announced a lot of stuff from Disney, Star Wars, Marvel. The Doc, Chris Mueller, and I actually broke down a lot of the announcements regarding Star Wars and Marvel on the episode, our latest review of The Mandalorian that went up yesterday, so check that out. We spoke a lot about it. I'm looking forward to the Obi-Wan Kenobi show with the involvement of, obviously, Ewan McGregor, but also Hayden Christensen coming back as Darth Vader, Anakin, whatever. I think that's really fucking cool. That was probably the biggest Star Wars announcement that I was like, holy shit, that's really cool. Like, we knew the Ahsoka Tano show is coming. I think that's cool. I'm not really attached to that character at all, so I'm like, oh, okay, cool, whatever. They have the Bad Batch show, a new Taika Waititi movie being directed by him. A new Star Wars movie being directed by him. There was definitely other stuff, but that's what really stood out to me. For Marvel, man, there was a lot of fucking Marvel announcements. The Eternals, obviously, we already knew was coming out. The return of Abomination for She-Hulk, I think, is really interesting. We have not heard or seen Abomination as far as the Marvel movies are concerned. I know that he's but like he's been referenced to in the shows. I don't watch the shows, unless it's on Disney+. So they referenced that Abomination is coming back for the She-Hulk show, which is really cool. We haven't seen him since the 2008 movie, which is wild, which is well over 10 years ago at this point, a dozen years ago. So that's cool. What is it, Tim Roth? Isn't that his name? The guy who played Abomination? I thought that was really nice. So I'm trying to think what else they announced. They announced a lot of stuff. The Hawkeye show we already knew about. What If we saw a trailer for. We saw an additional trailers for Falcon and the Winter Soldier. The WandaVision show, both of which are interesting. Guardians, the holiday special, and they also kind of referenced Guardians 3 coming out in 2023, which is cool. Thankfully, we finally got a release date on that, even though it's years away, but whatever. I'm trying to think. They announced a lot of stuff. But again, we broke down a lot of it in that episode of the Mandalorian review that we did yesterday, so check that out. And as far as the other Disney stuff goes, I saw that they're doing a Lightyear movie on Buzz Lightyear, like the guy that the Buzz Lightyear doll was inspired from from a movie standpoint in that universe. And I think that's really cool too, being voiced by Chris Evans. I think that's awesome, so a lot of announcements, a lot of stuff to look forward to. Hopefully none of this shit gets delayed. Like, we got a lot of cool announcements last year at, like, the Disney panel and the Marvel panel and Star Wars panel, and none of it materialized because of the pandemic. So we'll see what happens. But, and also the Fantastic Four stuff. How could I forget? I thought that was cool, too. Obviously, we knew the Fantastic Four were coming, but we finally got confirmation they're working on a Fantastic Four movie. When it's due out, I have no idea. Spider-Man 3 was also referenced. They didn't confirm that all the returning stars that have been rumored recently will be in the movie, but they confirmed that movie's coming out, I think in 2022, in summer of 2022, which is cool. Their third question, what do you think of Kenny Omega reforming the old Bullet Club? Do you think that the Young Bucks will join? Oh, that's a good question. I don't think so. I feel like he might attempt to recruit them. I thought the Young Bucks were going heel, and then they didn't. So, I don't know what the fuck's going on with them. Remember they were teasing that heel turn. They were acting like dicks, many months ago going into All Out. And then they won the tag titles, and it's like, or not All Out, Full Gear. And then they won the tag titles, and they're no longer dicks. Now they're, happy-go-lucky guys. I don't know. They're just not very likable characters. So it doesn't look like they're going heel. And instead, honestly, it looks like they might be setting up a Young Bucks Good Brothers match at some point. The Bucks are the AEW World Tag Team Champions. The Good Brothers are the Impact Tag Team Champions. It doesn't have to be title for title like with Rich Swann and Kenny Omega as I pitched earlier. But I think that'd be an awesome interpromotional match. I'm honestly not sure if we've ever gotten that match before because they've been a part of the Bullet Club for so long together. When Gallows and Anderson left the Bullet Club in early 2016, I don't think they ever had a match. They just kicked him out of the group, and then they went to WWE. So they might have had a match maybe before they joined Bullet Club together. I'm not 100% sure. I don't think so. But still, I think a Good Brothers Young Bucks match would be a lot of fun, kind of playing off what I think they were going to do in the debut Dynamite, if I remember correctly. Because they wanted to debut AJ and Gallows and Anderson on that first episode. If they all left WWE last year, obviously AJ didn't. None of them did, actually. But Gallows and Anderson were close. And then they were going to do a Kenny and Bucks versus AJ, Gallows, and Anderson feud, which sounds like money on paper. Obviously, AJ won't be involved, but I think, Young Bucks, Kenny Omega, Good Brothers rivalry would be a lot of fun. So I don't think the Bucks are going heel. I think Cody, honestly, has a better chance of going heel than the Bucks do at this point. And I don't think he's going to be involved in the whole Bullet Club thing, nor does he really need to be. He has his own stuff going on. So, I don't think the Bucks will go heel. I don't think the Bucks will go heel and join Bullet Club. I think it might be a case where they try to tease it, and they try to recruit them into their little mini Bullet Club reunion, and then they don't. Maybe they get Tama Tonga and Tangaloa, is that the other guy's name, involved? Gorillas of Destiny? Potentially. I think that'd be a lot of fun. Get New Japan involved as well. But I don't think the Bucks will end up joining the group. If anything, they might do a series of matches between the Bucks and the Good Brothers, which, again, like I said, could be a lot of fun. At Iwagoon91, will AEW still bring in War Games in the future? Definitely. I mean, they were heavily hyping up that, what was it called? The Match Beyond, Blood and Guts, for back in March or April or whatever it was. I think it was late March in New Jersey. Then they had to call it off due to the pandemic, so it didn't happen, hasn't happened yet. I think they still will. I don't know if they're waiting for more fans or if they can get into a different venue to do it, because I don't know if they can do it inside the stadium that they're in now, inside Daly's place. I'm not 100% sure. I know WWE was able to do it inside the Capitol Wrestling Center, which I was not expecting. I thought it was too small. And then they were able to do it anyway, so maybe they still can. I don't know. Inside Daly's place, but I think it's more a matter of when than if. It might be a while. It has to make sense. It can't be obviously Inner Circle and the Elite anymore, because Kenny Omega's heel, the Bucks aren't. Cody's doing his own thing, and Paige is doing his own thing, so that's clearly not going to happen. Matt Hardy was supposed to be involved, and they ended up doing the Stadium Stampede instead. So, I think they still will do it. Maybe not that match specifically, but maybe two different factions at some point. Maybe the Eddie Kingston, Butcher and Blade versus Lance Archer, Pac, Lucha Bros storyline. Maybe that'll be in the Match Beyond. I think that could be a lot of fun, and the feud would make sense for it too. So, again, it's more a matter of when than if, and I think it might be a little later down the line, but I think it's coming at some point nonetheless. Maybe they're waiting even until they're back in that arena, because they promised those fans that match. So maybe they're waiting until they're back in that arena, which, again, I don't think it's going to be for a while. His second question, your thoughts on this week's ratings for Raw, which, if you didn't hear, actually got record low ratings for the first time in, 27 years, however long it's been on the air. 1.5 million viewers, just over that, so just an embarrassing number. But, I mean, what would you expect? I mean, they advertised, the Nightmare Before TLC segment beforehand or something? I think a couple hours before, or a couple days on SmackDown, or something along those lines. And it just, I enjoyed it, but it's not exactly something that's going to entice millions of viewers to tune into the show. So, it's a pretty deplorable number. Obviously, something is going to stem from it. Around the same time 2 years ago, when they were getting pretty bad numbers for Raw. And they actually lost 1 million viewers since then, and that was only 2 years ago, which is pretty bad. The numbers were so low. They had the McMahons come out, promised that the fans were the authority now, which made no sense. They brought up a bunch of new people, established a few new things, and it ultimately led to absolutely nothing. So, with that being said, I think they're going to try to do something drastic again. What that would be, I don't know. I don't think a brand-to-brand invitational is going to solve anything. I don't think getting rid of the brand split will solve anything either, because they tried that with the wild card rule, and that didn't really work either. So I don't think they should do that. I think that'd be dumb. They just got to put more effort into making their shows better. And honestly, I think it's more of a Raw problem than a SmackDown problem, because we've already known in the last couple of months, specifically with SmackDown, the ratings, I don't know if they've improved overall, but they've improved most weeks in specific segments with Roman and Banks and Bayley and people like that. Did some great numbers. So I think it's more of a Raw problem than a SmackDown problem. The SmackDown numbers aren't where they should be considering it's on Fox, but the Raw numbers are completely deplorable. And you can't really blame it on, it's the holidays, it's football, blah, blah, blah. It's a lot of different factors, but it's been going down considerably for years now, to the point where they just got to put more effort into making people watch the show. So I don't know. It's pretty bad. I would expect something to stem from it. What that could be, I have no idea. And honestly, I fear what that might be, because it's very rarely actually positive change. Positive change would involve Vince being taken away from creative, which I don't expect to happen, and being completely hands-off with the product. Like when they appointed Paul Heyman and Eric Bischoff as the head of executive directors for Raw and SmackDown for creative. That went absolutely nowhere. It was just a lot of buzz that went really to nothing. The Heyman stuff I thought improved Raw for a while. The ratings weren't overly amazing, but I thought creatively the show was better. Then they bumped him from that position, and the show's been a complete crap fest ever since. So we'll see what stems from it. I imagine something will at some point in the near future. I just fear what that might be.
His next question here. Did you know that Triple H will likely go the entirety of this year not competing at all? I didn't really realize that. That's a good point. I mean, obviously he didn't compete at WrestleMania for the first time since 23? And the only reason why he didn't compete at 23 was because he was hurt. He got hurt a couple months before. So I think before that, you would have to go all the way back to probably when he debuted, right? Because he debuted in 95 after WrestleMania. He was at WrestleMania 96. He lost to Warrior in like a minute or two. Not even, I don't think. I think he's been on every Mania aside from 23. So that's pretty crazy. And obviously, it must have been the only Mania that he missed willingly. Not injury-related and whatever. So that is pretty crazy. I am honestly a little shocked that, a little bit. I'm a little shocked they didn't compete this year. But then again, though, considering the circumstances with no fans, like, you got to consider we haven't seen Cena since Mania. We haven't seen really any part-timer since Mania at all. We had the Taker farewell, but he hasn't wrestled since Mania, thankfully. He hasn't wrestled since Mania. Triple H hasn't. Cena hasn't. Goldberg hasn't, Brock hasn't, all the part-timers they would usually trot out there, and usually they do that, not only to boost interest in the product and in the shows and ratings and stuff, pop a rating, it's because of the fans, and to draw people to the shows and whatever, and since there are no fans in attendance, it doesn't even really matter. And I don't think anyone that I just mentioned would want to compete in front of no fans. Like, I don't see Triple H going out there and wrestling in the friggin' Performance Center. They just, introduced the Thunderdome back in August, and there really wasn't any point for him to compete after that point. So I'm not entirely surprised, but it is a fun fact, though, because he wasn't at Mania, and he missed his spot. So because he didn't wrestle at Mania, he went the whole year without wrestling, which is pretty crazy. I guess they kind of make up for it by having the 25-year celebration instead. What was it, back in April or whatever on SmackDown? So I guess that kind of made up for it. At E13A, his first question was, have you heard the report about Dabba-Kato, Mace, Omos? How do you pronounce his name? Omos? I don't know. What's his name? AJ Styles' bodyguard. Otis and Keith Lee being ordered by Vince to go back to the Performance Center. So I did see that. I didn't see all the names that you just mentioned aside from Keith Lee and Otis. The other ones, do not absolutely surprise me whatsoever. Dabba-Kato, Mace, Omos, all those guys are new. Omos specifically, I heard wasn't that good to begin with in the ring. So him being sent back to the PC for further training, not on a full-time basis, because obviously Keith Lee was sent to the PC, but he was on Raw this week. All those guys, I think, were on Raw this week. And Mace even wrestled. He faced Ricochet. Dabba-Kato hasn't been on the show since Raw Underground ended, but still, the other guys were on Raw this week, and Otis has been on SmackDown lately. So anyway, Keith Lee and Otis were obviously the most surprising of that bunch. Omos, I think, is already known to be terrible. He's got more progression to be done. Mace, a.k.a. Dio Madden, there's more progression there, I think, in the ring before he can kind of be a full-time member of the roster, even though he already is. And Dabba-Kato's been here for a long time. He was doing the Evolve shows. I've seen him at an Evolve show or two. He's not terrible. He's improved, but they probably feel like he needs further development before he can be called up full-time, even though he's been there for like 2 or 3 years at this point. 2 or 3, 4 years, maybe. But anyway, the Keith Lee and Otis ones were a little surprising just because Otis, maybe even though he's good as is, I guess he had a reputation, according to one of the reports from Fightful, I think it was Fightful, for hurting people. Don't know how true that is. I've never heard that before, but that was news to me. The Keith Lee one is just ridiculous. I mean, how do you send Keith Lee to the PC for further training when Nia Jax is still on the roster? And I mentioned this last week on WrestleRant Radio, I think with RJ. I mean, no, on the SmackDown review, I think is what it was. And that how do you send Keith Lee to the PC, but not Nia, who was notoriously injured up to like almost a dozen women in the last couple of years on the main roster? Like, that makes absolutely no sense. Keith Lee's fantastic, so that was a big head scratcher, and it just further proves why someone like Vince should not be in charge of anything creative based. I mean, I know that's not creative based, but it's still sad because it makes absolutely no sense to go from being super high on the guy to then thinking, oh, he needs further training. He's just fine. Maybe do a little better than him creatively than having him lose a 2-on-1 handicap match to The Miz and Morrison, who have barely won in 2020. Maybe do a little bit better than that, and then we'll talk. His next question: what's going to happen this Sunday at WWE TLC? Tables, ladders, and chairs. It should be a solid show. I said this before, but like the build has been completely abysmal, specifically from the Raw point of things. SmackDown's been a little better. The Roman and Kevin Owens feud has been the best thing of anything going into that show, I think. I mean, Orton and The Fiend has been pretty interesting, too. I just don't have faith the matches are going to be any good. That's the problem. Owens and Reigns, I know is going to be a great match just because they've had great matches before. So I don't really have much, I don't really have much doubt surrounding that. But yeah, no, I think it should be a solid show. Reigns and Owens is relatively new. We haven't seen it in several years, and the roles are reversed this time, so that should be fun. Drew and AJ feels like a total afterthought, but it's the first time they've ever faced off, so I expect it to be an entertaining match. The women's tag team title stuff, Nia and Shayna versus Asuka, and now a mystery partner because Lana's not even in the match. Listen, I don't care about the Lana stuff, but to take her out of the match when that's all they've been building to this entire time makes absolutely no sense. And it also drags on the feud longer than it needs to. So there's a lot of things wrong with that. But, yeah, it's just terrible. So I don't know what's going on there. Maybe Charlotte Flair is going to return. I've heard some speculation regarding that. Zero interest in Charlotte teaming with Asuka, the same woman who she tapped to the last time she was on the show 6 months ago. I mean, they've been such bitter rivals for so many years now, to have them just team up out of nowhere makes absolutely no sense. There's been zero build-up with that, so I hope that's not what they're going for. What else is on the card? The Raw Tag Team titles, I expect to change hands. I think the New Day are going to lose to the Hurt Business. And Carmella, Sasha, I expect Sasha to retain. So I'll get to my full predictions at some other point in the future. But as far as what I think is going to happen with the main matches and what I think is going to, what could be a solid show overall, I expect it to be entertaining. TLC is usually a pretty enjoyable show. It does stink we don't have a chairs match this year. I mean, the chairs match I don't really care about, but it does stink we don't have a ladder match this year or a tables match. But then again, we just got like 20 ladder matches this year in the company as it is, so I can't say I'm that disappointed. We literally just got one, I don't know, in NXT recently. I feel like we did. I feel like we got one in NXT a couple of weeks ago. I know when we had one at Halloween Havoc. I don't know. We've gotten a bunch lately, so I'm not too torn up about the fact that we're not getting one on Sunday. But usually the appeal of the pay-per-view is, you get a chairs match, you get a ladder match, you get a tables match, you get one or two TLC matches. Not this year, and that's fine, but despite the lackluster build, again, specifically on the Raw side of things, I still think it has the potential to be a pretty decent show.
Final three questions from @Scarlet1. First one being best and worst of the Wednesday Night Wars. I thought the shows were decent last week. NXT for a follow-up show to TakeOver I thought was fine, not overly newsworthy. Karrion Kross coming back was cool. Glad to see that. Ciampa and Grimes had a good match. The Raquel Gonzalez Ember Moon main event was solid. Pete Dunne and Killian Dane was good. Just kind of setting up a lot of matches that we should and probably will be seeing at New Year's Evil in a couple of weeks. So it was an effective show from that standpoint. Not overly exciting, but I thought it was solid for what it was. Dynamite, it just paled in comparison to what we saw the week earlier, which was expected. But like the Sting thing was a little underwhelming. Dustin Rhodes and Preston Vance, who cares? The Brandy Rhodes and Shaquille O'Neal interview I thought was a complete waste of time. Just not a lot of things really stuck with me on the show, to be completely honest. I thought it was, did they do TH2 versus Young Bucks last week? They did. And I thought that was good. I thought that was a nice way to open the show. The Inner Circle stuff was fine. That was entertaining. The six-man tag team match was also good. Kingston, Butcher, and Blade versus Archer and the Lucha Bros. That was entertaining. Abaddon, I could not care less about her. The Callis and Omega promo was entertaining, but no different than what we heard on Impact the week before or the night before. And the MJF Orange Cassidy match just kind of felt flat for me in the main event. So 2 solid shows, not great. I'm expecting hopefully better shows tonight. Not 2 shows that would urge you to go out of your way to see if you didn't catch them previously or originally. Their second question, best non-WWE/AEW matches of 2020. I mean, obviously there's so many to count, but just off the top of my head, not in any particular order, and I'll probably do a concrete list at some point, whether it be in podcast version or written version or something, but off the top of my head, WWE AEW, the Men's Royal Rumble match was fantastic. Styles and Taker wasn't really a match, but it was a match, a boneyard match. I thoroughly enjoyed that from WrestleMania 36. AJ Styles, Daniel Bryan, the Intercontinental title match from that episode of SmackDown in June of this year on SmackDown. Very good stuff. That was a great match. Walter and Ilya Dragunov from NXT UK for the WWE, the NXT UK Championship they're calling it now, from late October. That was fantastic. Roman and Drew, not match of the year, but a very, very good match from Survivor Series. Thoroughly enjoyed that. The 2 matches that Roman and Jey Uso had at Clash of Champions and Hell in the Cell were fantastic. Sasha and Bayley from Hell in the Cell was great. Rhea Ripley and Charlotte Flair. NXT matches honestly don't really stand out to me as much. I thought the triple threat main event for In Your House was very good. I don't know if it was the match of the year, but I thought it was really good. Obviously, there's a lot more I'm not thinking of. Balor and Kyle O'Reilly was fantastic from TakeOver 31. Io Shirai and Rhea Ripley from a recent episode of NXT for the NXT Women's Championship was really good. The Candice and Io match from Halloween Havoc, the TLS match, I think it was called, for the NXT Women's title, that was great too. I mean, these are all like women's matches, but I can't think of many other matches, to be honest. Balor and Gargano from TakeOver Portland, Ciampa and Cole from TakeOver Portland, Keith Lee and Dominic Dijakovic from TakeOver Portland. That whole show was fantastic. Broserweights versus Undisputed Era was great. There's a lot of matches. There's a lot that come to mind. Specifically those, though. Adam Cole and Keith Lee, I don't know if I would say that. In the Battle of the Champions, I don't know if I would say that match, but that was also very noteworthy and newsworthy. From AEW, the Revolution Tag Team match, Young Bucks, Omega, Page, fantastic tag team match. I would put that on the list. I would say Stadium Stampede I'd probably put on that list. I thoroughly enjoyed that. And Moxley and Omega, probably not. I mean, it was a very good match, but it was more of an angle than a match to me. Shida and Thunder Rosa from All Out, Young Bucks and FTR from Full Gear was fantastic. Those are just a couple that really stand out. There's probably more I'm not thinking of, but those are the ones that stand out. None of like the Jericho and Orange Cassidy matches. MJF and Jungle Boy had a really good match at Double or Nothing too. And there's been a lot of good TV matches, again, that I'm not thinking of. Moxley and Darby Allin from Dynamite. Private Party versus the Young Bucks versus Butcher and Blade. The False Gun Anywhere match was really, really good. Oh, man. Again, there's more I'm not thinking of at the moment, but those would probably lead my list. And the final question, if given the power, what wrestler would you make mainstream popular? And they put mainstream in quotation marks. Interesting question. Not a lot of names came to mind, and obviously it depends on your definition of the word mainstream. But when I think mainstream, I'm thinking like, okay, people who don't watch wrestling would think would know this person, if that makes sense. You could say Roman, I guess, is already kind of a little mainstream popular, not entirely, but probably the most well-known active competitor that's not named John Cena or The Undertaker, someone like that, or Randy Orton or whatever. I would probably say AJ Styles, just because AJ's only been around in the company for a couple of years, but he's been doing this for like close to 15 years. But no one really knows who AJ is, just because he's relatively new. He was in TNA for a long time, but if you only watch WWE, you would have no idea who this guy is. And I think he deserves more recognition for as good as he is. If people know who Shawn Michaels is for as long as he was on top and for as long as he was around, from the 90s to the 80s to the 90s to the 2000s, then I think AJ deserves similar recognition. He deserves similar notoriety for being as good as he is one of the best wrestlers of all time, which I don't think it's a stretch in saying that. I wouldn't put him in like my top maybe 5 of all time, who knows, but he would be up there. I mean, he would be on that list, I would say, for sure. Just wrestlers in general, not WWE. But I think he deserves more people to know about him, if that makes sense. So I would probably say AJ Styles, just because, again, he's only been in the company for a couple of years, so it's understandable why he wouldn't have more mainstream popularity than he does right now. But had he come up in the company in, like, again, late 90s, early 2000s, even late 2000s, I think more people would know who AJ Styles is, as far as non-wrestling fans are concerned, than they do currently. But that's about it. That's going to do it for episode 368, I believe, of #AskGSM here today, December 16, 2020. Yeah, 368 is the episode number here today. So thanks, as always, for sending in the questions. Be sure to send in more questions at WrestleRant with the #AskGSM on the Twitter machine, on Facebook as well, facebook.com/Graham.GSM.Matthews. Leave a question on the post that I usually put up on Tuesday nights, if not in the wall itself. And be sure to drop a question down below in the comment section of this very video. I'll include it in next week's edition. So again, December 23rd, Christmas episode, next Wednesday. Be sure to check that one out. Like, share, subscribe, comment, all that stuff greatly appreciated. And hit the bell button for more daily content. Have a great one, guys. Enjoy the rest of your holiday season. I'm Graham GSM Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.